It began as a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. The late summer sky over the East Coast was a severe, clear blue. Millions were commuting, grabbing coffee, and settling into their desks. They had no idea that 4 commercial airliners were currently being transformed into the most devastating weapons in history. 19 men had bypassed security with nothing more than small knives and a cold, calculated plan. They chose 4 specific flights, all bound for the West Coast. Why? Because a transcontinental flight requires a massive payload of jet fuel. On this morning, those planes weren't just transport, they were flying fireballs. At 8:46 a.m., the silence over Lower Manhattan was shattered. American Airlines Flight 11 screamed over the city and slammed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. It struck between the 93rd and 99th floors, severing every stairwell and elevator bank. Hundreds of people above the impact zone were instantly cut off. For 17 minutes, the world watched the smoke in a state of collective denial. The media called it a tragic accident, a pilot's error, a horrific mechanical failure. Then, at 9:03 a.m., the denial ended. Live on international television, United Airlines Flight 175 curved over the harbor and sliced into the South Tower. The explosion was massive. In that second, the word accident vanished from the global conversation. This was a coordinated strike. The heart of the world's financial capital was under siege. As New York descended into chaos, the nightmare expanded. At 9:37 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 struck the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia. The seed of the world's most powerful military was now burning. Panic began to ripple across the globe. Where was the next plane? How many were there? There was a 4th plane, United Airlines Flight 93, but the story of this flight was different. Using seatback phones, the passengers learned the fate of the Twin Towers. They realized their plane was a missile headed for Washington, D.C. They didn't wait for a miracle. They became the first counterattack of a new kind of war. After a desperate struggle to retake the cockpit, the plane plummeted into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. They sacrificed themselves to save the nation's capital. Back in Manhattan, the unthinkable was about to happen. The intense heat from thousands of gallons of burning jet fuel began to soften the massive steel columns. At 9:59 a.m., the South Tower, the building hit second, groaned and collapsed in a terrifying roar, disappearing into a mountain of dust. 29 minutes later, at 10:28 a.m., the North Tower followed. In less than 2 hours, the iconic skyline of New York had been erased. Among the debris were hundreds of firefighters and police officers, men and women who had run into the towers to save others, knowing the risks, but never imagining the buildings could actually fall. By noon, for the first time in history, the FAA ordered every single plane in U.S. airspace to land immediately. The skies went eerily silent. The events of that morning lasted only 102 minutes, but they triggered a global earthquake. Border security was reinvented. The Department of Homeland Security was born. 2 decades of war in Afghanistan followed. We don't just remember September 11th as a date in a history book. We live in the world it created. Every time you walk through an airport, every time you see a silhouette of the New York skyline, you are seeing the ripples of that clear Tuesday morning. Understanding that day isn't just about the past, it's the only way to understand the world as it is now.